News that we are tracking. The U.S. House has voted against U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs on Canada. 6 Republicans joined Democrats pushing against the levies Trump slapped on Canada based on his so-called fentanyl emergency at the border.
Voted today to rebuke President Trump's tariffs on Canada. 6 Republicans joined Democrats passing a resolution to repeal those tariffs.
Breaking, something just shifted inside Washington. Trump's tariff war against Canada was supposed to pressure Ottawa. Instead, it just triggered a revolt at home. Republicans didn't just whisper their concerns, they voted against him. And this could turn into the biggest political headache of his second term. In a stunning moment on the House floor, members of Trump's own Republican Party crossed the line and voted against his Canada tariff policy. Not Democrats, not critics from abroad, Republicans. The very lawmakers who stood behind him during the campaign are now publicly rejecting the national emergency he used to justify tariffs on Canada. What started as a trade fight with Ottawa is now turning into an internal political battle in Washington. And when your own party begins to fracture, that's not just disagreement, that's danger. For months, the White House insisted the tariffs were about strength, about protecting American interests, about sending a message to Canada that the United States would not tolerate what it called a security failure at the border. The language was tough. The tone was confident. The message was clear. This was necessary. But politics has a way of changing when reality hits home. Because while speeches were being delivered in Washington, something else was happening in Nebraska, in Pennsylvania, in Washington State, in Colorado. Farmers were watching input costs rise, manufacturers were adjusting supply chains, small businesses were running new numbers and not liking what they saw, and voters were asking quiet questions. Who is actually paying for this? When the House finally voted, it wasn't just another routine roll call. It felt tense, heavy, personal. Lawmakers knew what it meant. 219 votes to terminate the emergency declaration, 211 to keep it. 6 Republicans stepped away from party unity and said no. That word no echoed far louder than anyone expected. Because when opposition comes from the other side of the aisle, it's predictable. But when it comes from your own side, it sends a message that something deeper is shifting. It says the issue is no longer partisan. It says the costs are becoming impossible to ignore. Some of those Republicans didn't hide behind vague statements. They spoke clearly. They said the tariffs were hurting their states, hurting farmers, hurting consumers, hurting manufacturers. These were not attacks from political rivals. These were concerns from allies. And that is what makes this moment dangerous for Trump. He built his second term around the idea that tariffs are leverage, that they are tools of strength, that America must use economic pressure to win. For a while, that message held firm inside his party. Leadership blocked efforts to challenge the policy. Procedural rules were used to prevent votes. The strategy was protected. Until it wasn't. The procedural shield collapsed first. A narrow vote cracked open the door. Then, the full House stepped through it. And suddenly, the policy that once looked untouchable looked vulnerable. Now here's where it gets even more complicated. The economic data hasn't been kind. Independent analysts have shown that while some businesses absorb part of the tariff costs, much of it gets passed down to consumers. That means higher prices, slower growth, thinner margins. It's not dramatic overnight collapse, it's slow pressure. The kind people feel at the grocery store, at the supply warehouse, in their monthly expenses. And voters remember that feeling. So when lawmakers from trade-heavy states looked at those numbers, they had a choice. Stay aligned with the White House, or align with the economic reality back home. 6 of them chose reality. The president responded quickly. He warned of consequences. He talked about primary challenges. He made it clear that defying him would not be forgotten. But here's the thing about threats. They only work when authority feels absolute. When cracks appear, threats can start to look like weakness. And the cracks are visible now. Meanwhile, Canada has not escalated emotionally. Ottawa didn't turn this into daily political theater. It didn't match fire with fire. Instead, it presented data, reinforced cooperation at the border, and kept messaging steady. Calm. Professional. Almost patient. That patience is starting to matter. Because Canada doesn't need to convince American voters. It needs American voters to convince their own lawmakers. And that process appears to be unfolding in real time. The bigger issue for Trump is momentum. Once a policy faces open rebellion inside the party, others start watching closely. Lawmakers who were hesitant begin to wonder if they're alone. When they see colleagues cross the line and survive, hesitation turns into possibility. That's how political shifts begin. Quietly. Then, suddenly, this fight is also moving beyond Congress. Legal questions are circling around the use of national emergency powers for trade policy. If courts decide that the emergency declaration stretched too far, the foundation of the tariffs could weaken even more. That would transform this from a political dispute into a constitutional one. So now the president faces pressure on multiple fronts. Internal party dissent, economic scrutiny, legal uncertainty, and public debate that is growing louder, not quieter. And here's the emotional core of this story. This was never just about tariffs, it was about control. About whether the White House could shape economic policy without resistance. About whether party loyalty would outweigh economic impact. About whether calling an ally a security threat would go unchallenged. For a while, it did. But not anymore. The House vote may not remove the tariffs tomorrow. There are more steps ahead. The Senate could act. The president could veto. Courts could intervene. The story is still unfolding. But politically, something real has changed. Unity has fractured. And once a party publicly divides over a cornerstone policy, it doesn't easily return to perfect alignment. Doubt spreads quietly. Conversations shift behind closed doors. Calculations change. Canada, watching from the outside, understands this. It doesn't need to celebrate.